So a few weeks ago, I showed you how I built the chicken coop. And in this video, I'm gonna be showing you how I build the chicken coop run. To start off, I flipped out the wings on my miter saw stand and cut some 2x4s to length in order to build a wall. You could of course build the walls directly on site. However, I thought it much easier to build on a big flat floor and then transport them afterwards. After cutting each of the studs to length, I quickly marked off where each one needed to go on the bottom plate, used a speed square to transfer the location to the top plate, and then started attaching the studs with a framing nailer. I'm using a nailer because I have one, but you could also go with drills and screws if you don't. After I built the first wall, I repeated the steps to make a second the same way. In order to have the rain runoff, I made the front a few inches taller than the back wall. With the walls put together, I next paused to paint them. The entire run is wrapped in hardware cloth to keep chicken-eating critters out, and take my word that it is much easier to paint before any screening goes down. So I propped the walls up on some scraps and gave everything I could reach a good coating. Keeping myself busy while those were drying, I started making the door to the run. I used up a lot of the offcuts from making the walls for this. Again, since I have a nailer, that's what I used to make it go quicker. Then once the framing was done, I also gave it a coat of paint. Alright, and now on to screening. For this, I'm using 1/2-inch hardware cloth, and its job is to keep anything that can eat chickens away from the chickens. I would start off on one end of the wall and throw a few bussy clamps on to hold the cloth securely, while I unrolled the needed amount to stretch over to the other side. Here, a few more clamps can be placed to hold it down so that I could go through and start stapling it down. I'd start on one end, working my way towards the other, while using my hand to work out any of the folds or extra material as I moved. Once a panel was stapled down, I would use a right angle grinder to cut off the excess. And this one is a little bit overkill, but my small 3-inch grinder had a dead battery. At this point, everything that I could do inside the shop was done, so next I loaded up the 2 walls and the door onto a trailer and moved to the chicken coop to start installing the walls. Real quick before setting those walls, I want to thank this video's sponsor, which is Coop Audio. I have been using the Coop Audio Bluetooth speaker on my job site lately, and this thing is awesome. The commuter is a portable wireless Bluetooth speaker that packs a lot of sound in a compact package. And that's exactly what I need since I move around and work in so many different settings. It's small and lightweight, so I can easily carry it around in my backpack, but don't let the small size fool you. This compact speaker not only has superior sound quality, it also has a built-in subwoofer that gives a ton of bass. There are 2 equalizer modes, indoor and outdoor, that ensure that I always have the best sound. I also love that it's water resistant, so there's no fear about taking it outside, around a pool, or even to the river with me. On a single charge, I can get 8 hours of music. I just connect it to my phone and can walk up to 30 feet away without interruption. And when I get a phone call, it turns itself into a speakerphone.
Hey, when are you getting those chickens?
I'm working on it, Mama. Right now you can get the Coop Audio commuter for 65% off by clicking the link down in the description and using the discount code AW65. Let's go ahead and get back to setting those walls. To do that, I first started digging holes to place a few pavers for the walls to rest securely on. I started with getting the depth of the paver closest to the coop figured out first. After getting the depth about right, I would also level it up in both directions. With that one said, I just worked my way out, moving over to where about the center of the wall would land, and then set another paver level with the first. When I tried to put a level across the 2 stones, the dirt in between got in the way. To kind of skirt around this issue, I just placed another block on top of each existing block to build up the height so that the level could span across. Once I had 3 on one side complete, I moved to the other side and repeated with 3 more. Now making sure to read level not only off the first paver I set, but also the paver across from the one being set. Oh, and a quick tip for you, my local store only had foot-long pavers, which were much longer than needed. I wouldn't care if I weren't having to dig a hole to accommodate it. So instead of using the full length, I broke them in half. Kind of caveman style. That's one way to make yourself feel like a kung fu ninja. Pavers are set and level, so now time to move in the walls. Remember that I have a short wall and a tall wall to create a slant in the roof. If you build this project, make sure you note the wall you're picking up and placing. Once in place, I secured them to the chicken coop with my nailer. Next was to make some rafters which would join the 2 walls together. I set up a quick workstation right there on the job site with a mobile workbench and a battery-operated miter saw, and then started cutting some 2x4s to length. For the roofing system, I try to keep this nice and simple, so these rafters span between the two walls instead of sitting on top. I would place a few Bessie clamps on the studs before setting the rafters, and these acted as a third hand to hold up one end while I was pre-drilling and securing the other end with screws. Note that if you don't want to be ducking in your run, you can easily adjust the height to however tall you want it by simply making the studs in the wall taller. After getting all the rafters attached, I went back to my nailer and attached a few cross braces in between each rafter. Okay, and now to deck it. Depending on the type of roofing you go with for your run, you might not have to deck it. I'm using the same shingles that I used on the Coop, which is much easier to install if the roof is decked. So next I threw up some plywood. I cut the first sheet to land halfway on a rafter, then cut a short section to cover the rest of the roof. Now to just hop up and nail it down and then move on to shingles. I used some flexible flashing that also has a peel and stick underside to span over the gap between the deck roof line and the existing coop. This will prevent water from getting in between the two. Then I started screwing down the shingles. When roofing, you always want to start at the lowest point and work towards the peak. This way, whenever water runs downhill, it will always stay on top of the material and not have a way under. This particular shingle has corrugations in it, which requires a screw to be placed into each one. The screw has a special washer on it to seat around the hole that you punch through the material, which prevents water from getting in. Okay, little roof takes a little time. So back down to the ground to do some dirt work and prepare to install what is called the predator apron. When chicken killers come knocking on the wall to try to get in and then realize they can't, they will try to dig under the walls. Those persistent little. To prevent them from being able to do that, wire meshing is also placed around the entire perimeter of the coop. I wanted to frame in the underside of the coop to give the girls a little bit more room, so a few more framing members were added in to give something to attach this meshing to. Then I placed the same hardware cloth I used on the walls all the way around the coop and the run. And a quick note on this, when I built my neighbor's chicken coop, I used hardware cloth for the run, but wire meshing for the apron, which does keep the foxes, raccoons, and bobcats out, but not snakes. So, lesson learned, go ahead and use the smaller hold hardwire cloth for both. Okay, don't laugh. Well, you can if you want to, it is funny. I actually screened myself out. I realized when I went to go put in the door next that I screened over the panel it belongs. No problem though. I grabbed my grinder, and see, this is a much more appropriate size grinder for the job. And I cut out the screening on the far right panel so that I could pop the door in its place. Ah! Attack! When installing the door, I of course used a few hinges and a handle, but I also placed 2 barrel bolts. Again, thinking about critters being able to get in. I placed one at the top as well as at the bottom of the door. Alright, and that is it for the build portion of the run. Next was to bring in some dirt and start covering up the predator apron and also grading a little bit. I used my tractor to bring in a bucket full and then a hard rake to spread it all around, making sure to get a nice coat on top of the apron to hide it. Now before calling it quits, let's make a few accessories that the girls will certainly need. First is a food dispenser. I grabbed about a 3-foot section of 3-inch PVC pipe and a 90-degree elbow. After cutting it to length, I used a hole saw bit to cut out a few holes along this length. I used some sandpaper to make the edges nice and smooth, then threw an end cap on the end to complete it. I angled these holes slightly so that the food inside wouldn't want to spill out, but hopefully will shield it from getting water into it. The idea is that this can be secured to the inside of the coop, then chicken feed can be dropped in from the top to fill up the container, giving the chicks multiple access points to feed from. You can also use another end cap at the top to cap it all off. I actually cut a slit in mine and made it hinge open and closed for easier access. Alright, and last thing was a watering system. I bought a 5-gallon bucket, which I then drilled a few holes all along the perimeter. And I thread in the waterers. Let's go with it. I bought these little chicken waterers where the chickens can use their beak to push against the yellow part, which opens up a valve and lets fresh water into the cup. To prevent from having to bring a hose inside the coop to refill it, I quickly drilled a hole in the lid of the bucket, then grabbed some more PVC, which I routed to the outside of the coop. I made sure the elbow fitting in the end was large enough for a hose to fit inside, so that I can simply bring a hose over and top them off whenever it's needed. After doing this, I'll probably go back and route the top of the food system to the outside as well. Alright, and I think that's it. Now I just need to put shavings inside the coop and introduce the girls to their new home. My neighbor, who you might remember I built a massive coop for, actually hatched these baby girls for me. It's okay, it's okay. Oh, you just want to stay here with me? Oh, it peed on me. Oh, no, that's poop. It pooped on me. You just want to stay here with me? That's a good sign. I do intend for them to be free range, but I wanted the run because the new chickens need to be kept in the coop for about 2 weeks when being first introduced to it. And I just wanted them to have a little bit more leg room other than the coop itself. Also, we occasionally get predators like bobcats and packs of coyotes in the area. So again, this will give them more leg room should I ever need to stow them away while these predators move about. Hey, little one. If you're interested in building your own, I do have a set of plans not only for this chicken coop, but also the much larger one I built for my neighbors. So check the description if you're interested. That's it. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I will see you on my next project.
Now for the main trick. Now you see the mosquito. Tippy. Tippy. Hey. Tippy, get the bug. Good girl. Good girl.